Welcome everyone to the panel Next Steps, How to Build a Startup from a Hackathon Project. Today's discussion will be moderated by Rati Endra and Anushikha.
Yeah, so we're really happy to see you. This is our second panel. Really happy to see all of you. And yeah, as we all know, and I have attended multiple hackathons in San Francisco, there's like dozens of them every single week, and there's so much great energy and ideas being created that often don't lead anywhere. So we really want to take this time today and have brought together this lovely group of entrepreneurs and otherwise inspiring people to talk a bit about how to actually take the next steps and actually go further with the idea and the energy. So yeah.
Today on the panel we have Chinat, who is an AI researcher and a master's student at Stanford University. Anushikha, she is a product leader and a Stanford graduate student. We have Marko, the co-founder and CEO at supersimple.io. We have Sonia, a children's media researcher, and Akio, who is a serial entrepreneur and a startup advisor. And how to move forward with your idea after a hackathon is crucial for the next steps. So for an opening, as a warm-up, I'm going to have a quick question to all of you. Let's start with China. In one sentence, what best advice have you received when building your first product?
One sentence.
Okay. One sentence. Best advice that I received, I think, is really kind of like talking to your customers and end users. I think especially at a hackathon, we come in, get so much energy, and we build with all of our friends, and we come up with this great project. But often we don't really end up talking to the end users, right? And so, for example, if you're building something that helps like an elderly, potentially talking to your grandma and asking her opinion about that, I think would go very far in terms of helping you think about how to take your project further.
To add to China's point, if I have to say the best advice that I've gotten when it comes to building a product is actually to not build and test out your hypothesis first. I guess what really helps is designing a set of experiments that you can use to validate your hypotheses or just like completely fail, but the cost would not be that much and you'd learn a lot and you'd actually be moving closer towards building the product that you really want for your end user.
I think it's really useful to sort of focus on falling in love with the problem rather than whatever solution you ended up starting with for a random reason. It's really hard to necessarily crack what your company's going to look like in several years in a hackathon, but you can definitely get excited about a problem and then spend your next many years hopefully on it.
I think the best advice I received was to self-regulate the early founder energy because it's very easy to get excited and treat product features like an all-you-can-eat buffet. And just because you can, you shouldn't. So it's nice to regulate.
Okay, I think one I've read actually was people are easy to fool, and the easiest person to fool is yourself. So I think that especially goes towards user interviews. You just hear the stuff you want to hear, so you have to be really careful so that you listen diligently to the users and also interpret what they're saying, so that you're not fooled in building something which doesn't work or doesn't sell.
Yeah, a lot of great ideas being heard, and multiple of you mentioned already validation, and I think that's one of the main biggest questions is whether you should even pursue this. People come up with all of those wild ideas during hackathons, but how can one differentiate between whether they should actually be pursuing it? So I'll first turn that to you, Sonia, as you have a lot of past experience with hackathons, and we're all very happy to hear all of your thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, so I think that when you think about validation and understanding a problem, there's a framework that I like to use called the cone of understanding. And when you think about the cone of understanding, you think about it on 3 layers. The first question that you want to ask is, how is this problem related to me? right? And in order to think about this, there are different activities and exercises that you can do, whether it be the 5 why exercise, where you constantly ask yourself, why is this a problem that you're excited upon? Or just reflecting and thinking about your highs and lows or journals. This is the first layer. The second layer is asking, how is this problem related to the people immediately around me? And that is when you go out to talk to your friends, your family, your loved ones, and asking their opinion about understanding the problem. So let's say, for example, I'm working on, creating a recipe app. Perhaps other than asking myself, why do I care about this recipe app, I can also ask my parents, right? Because their experiences might be different as well too. Once you understand this on the secondary level, then you understand it on the third level, which is how this problem relates to the wider society. That's when you want to look at it from the competitive research level, thinking about what is existing out there in the market, what other people are already doing, and how you can build on top of that. The reason why I like this kind of cone of understanding and this hierarchy is because you first start from yourself, then the people immediately around you, before spreading out to the broader, wider society. And I find that so often we like to either jump into going out into the real world, searching up other products, that we often lose that focus about why is this problem really related to you. And having this gradual progression and this circle is a really great way in terms of grounding your motivation on the problem, which is so important when it comes to the longer term, especially as you come into different obstacles. And like one of our other speakers were mentioning earlier, you are going to run into these obstacles, right? And building a startup isn't like a hackathon where it's just a single weekend, but you're going to run into many problems and you might have to pivot and change. But at the end of the day, the thing that really drives you and keeps you going isn't necessarily that initial Kickstarter, but rather that intrinsic motivation and that drive and that passion towards that problem.
But I guess tying it more into your specific experiences to sort of exemplify it for our audience, how have you sort of known that out of those, people often say that ideas are worthless in itself, and how have you known that this is the idea that I actually should long-term pursue and work on, and this is shines out from the rest of the ideas, and knowing that this idea is too late and moving on to the next stage of actually building it out?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think often with these things, when we're at different hackathons, we often expose and we talk to different people, come up with different ideas. But the ideas that really stick with you, I think, are often problems that really resonate with you. So I know that over the past, 30-odd hackathons, I've come up with a bunch of different projects. And there are certain projects that I've taken further than others. And I think that kind of personal relationship, tying it back to earlier what I was sharing about the cone of understanding, has been one of the factors that has driven my motivation and incentives in terms of continuing to build out on that project. One of the ones, for example, I think took pretty far was a project called Grand Connect, where at that time we were looking at how can we connect a younger generation with their grandparents using the help of AI. And the idea here was that essentially it would send us prompts and ideas every other week to encourage us to have that conversation with our great-grandparents. And the reason why I took this project further was not only because I think that we won the hackathon and there was a lot of traction there, but also at that time my grandparents they just recently were going through a kind of having some health issues, and it made me realize how important their lives were, and having that kind of personal connection and being able to kind of recognize that incentivized me to really continue working on it. And so I continued working on it for quite a while, and eventually we even pitched it to business case competitions and further.
But I guess also expanding that question to overall recognizing the sort of the next great idea to work on. Marko or Akio have been a lot of serial founders. How have you sort of had those moments of recognizing those ideas and knowing that this is the one that I want to work on, and sort of seeing the long-term potential there?
So for me, I've been building Super Simple for over 3 years now. It was supposed to start off as I had a spare weekend and I hadn't coded in a while, so I was like, let me do a 24-hour thing and just have fun and then forget about it. But in my case, it was less about sort of rationally thinking about I really care about this problem and it's a great opportunity because of this and that, but rather sort of my monkey brain just at some point could not stop thinking about this. So I actually was supposedly spending all of my time building another company at that time. And at one point I just found myself I could not ignore this problem. I was so excited by it. So there's the first few days you've got a very different type of motivation, at least I do, where you sort of just get excited about a new thing, you can go into a little rabbit hole. But if a couple of months later you feel like you're thinking about it more and more rather than less and less, then I think that's just a sign that you should probably go deep into it.
Yeah, I think it's similar. I think it also really depends on, like in what space you want to build something. I think for a lot of like B2C ideas, I think stuff like, problems which impact overall populations, I think this connection is super important. In my case, it was also a little bit different. It was coming, so I did mostly B2B, and for me it was a continuation of, what are things I noticed in a B2B setting, in work settings, and how can I expand into it to solve the problem. So it was more grounded upon like experience of what I've seen, and also like a general excitement around that space so that it carries you forward in case you do like smaller pivots left and right.
Yeah, that's definitely very, very good advice. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add that, we can look at the decision-making process from like an ant's eye view where we're on the ground, and then a bird's eye view where we're zooming out and looking at the bigger picture, seeing the connections. So even like kind of like the cone analogy, when we start off sort of from our lived experience, but eventually we do have to see how it connects with the world. So as a children's media researcher, I get a ton of like pitches to advise on for using AI thoughtfully in children's media. And I usually look for, is it just trying to ride the wave of being AI first and just, adding all the bells and whistles they can? Or is it genuinely associated with some kind of needs of a learner? And one example is there have been a ton of pitches of AI literacy TV shows for children, or AI literacy bots, or AI literacy companion. And the one project that I picked is called Zoe and Ollie. It originated in Turkey. The studio that's developing it has a lot of educators involved. They work with classrooms a lot. And so they were coming at it not from like a technology first perspective, but really on integrating it in classroom settings, as opposed to some of the other pitches I received were more like, we want to be the first AI literacy television show. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that would be nice to have, but that's not the goal. And so trying to be first at something, the GTM strategy is like such a buzzword here, like just go to market right away. We want to be the first, we want to be the innovators and path-breaking, whatever, revolutionary technology. And on the other end is slowing down and taking the time to do some initial research. So there has to be, I think, especially in the Bay Area, that there needs to be a balance, that we can be research informed without slowing down too much.
Lots of great points have been shared already. Just to add to all these incredible points, one experiment that I would suggest you can think of is that once you have a project that you're really excited about at the end of your hackathon, for example, how do you monetize it? So basically, are you able to onboard people who actually want to pay for your product? So that is where you are able to say that, oh yeah, there is actually a need. I mean, people love free products. People love free products. Last summer, I was working on a product and I just rolled it out for free to users, just like that, and people loved it. We got an NPS score of 90, which is incredible, but that was a free product. That did not validate the demand of actually that product. The situation would be very different if you roll it out and you try to onboard paying customers. If you do not get a paying customer, that is kind of either it tells you that maybe they are not your target audience, or it tells you that there is probably some difference in the need for your product and the market out there, and then you think about it again. And if you're able to get it, that's your sign. Go ahead, launch it, build it. There's something out there for your. There seems to be some form of a fit for your product out in that market.
So Anushikha, how do you find your first users? I know that you developed a education tool that is very relevant to this hackathon, and scaled it to 200,000 users. How did you start with that? How did you went from 0 to 1?
I can give some context first. So I was working on this product from 0 to 1 within an organization that was already building a product. So my role was that of an entrepreneur. The thing is, if you already have resources and users, the first question that I would personally think of is, who are my users? And I would try to double down on them. I would try to identify who are my super users, who are the users who are using my platform, my products again and again. I would think of them first and see, is there a gap that I can fill right now that is not being filled for them? And then I would try to work for them. If that is validated, then I would go to the next set of users. Basically, like just to answer your question, I would start with my most important users and I would try to truly understand them. I would talk to them. I would actually like sit with them, understand how their day goes by, how their week goes by, what are some of the most important or their top 3 challenges. If something that I'm building is probably not in their top 3 set of challenges, then it's not a priority for them, and my product probably would be a nice to have but not a must have product for them. So that is a kind of framework that I use super early on when I'm thinking of building something.
Thank you.
I'll add one thing to this. So to the earlier question about what's the best advice I've heard, I think actually to answer this question, I think it might have been Paul Graham or somebody that I think put this quite well. Like there's a very frequent question of where do you find your first users? Very obvious question. And his answer, which I found was great, was that you should just know a couple of people that will be your first users, right? If you don't know those people, then how do you actually understand the problem? I think especially in a B2B setting, it's possible that you're not going to be able to sell to those guys that you know immediately because maybe they're bigger companies or whatever. But if you're just sort of in a garage somewhere and thinking like, okay, like I built this fantastic thing, no idea who would want this, but like let me do a campaign of some sort to find these people. Like that's probably showing that there's something wrong in the order of operations. But if you know like, I know Akio would absolutely love this product at his company, that's some validation. Like then I would go to Akio instead of trying to like broadly go to, do go to market.
That makes totally sense. Sonia, drawing onto your research as a children researcher, especially when it comes to this hackathon, AI in education, and developing projects that help learning, how do you think that fits into the user research? Where would you start looking for users?
I think even before approaching participants for user research, just the design itself, we often product designers don't realize that when designing for children, every 6 months or so, they hit a new milestone developmentally that completely changes the perspective of how they use and understand different products. So that's where we begin, from the design itself, try to figure out your target audience first, reach out to some educators, caregivers. If you haven't directly been around children, maybe volunteer at a daycare center or some other place where you're exposed to children as users. Because it's very, very different from adult users. And then for recruiting, if you are working at an EdTech company, partnering with a university is always easier because they usually have a partnership with school districts, so getting in and the entire consenting process can be easier. If you don't have that kind of collaboration, I think museums, summer camps, daycares, type of third spaces for children other than home and other than school, they are usually open to collaboration for research and testing.
Yeah, again, very great points. I think this also ties into the sort of general thing that people often say is that instead of people get so obsessed with chasing those numbers, we have 1,000 users, but actually having those having those 10 users who are actually very truly love your product is so much more invaluable. So yeah, I would love to hear more of your thoughts of how to actually truly onboard them and truly understand if the person is very deeply affiliated with it, or it's sort of something that just is understanding whether it's actually the medicine, or is it truly just like a gummy to have. So yeah, again, we'd love to.
Regarding vitamins or supplements and painkillers, I think it's the right approach to look for the big pains for sure. And how to know if this is really a pain point? I think you mentioned it at the very beginning. Like, how can you maybe quantify how big the problem is? How often does a problem appear? Do they actually care for it? So, for instance, if you do B2B, you do a lot of outreach, right? You try to win customers, and if you kind of feel a roadblock where people are not responding or like reaching out to you by themselves, maybe you have gotten the wrong angle, the wrong person. So I think that's just something I usually look out for, that people actually also care and also ask about this stuff. That's usually a good sign that you're onto something.
I would firstly pick a super niche set of users, and I would build for them first. I would prove success with those users first before trying to find my next set of users. So you made a great point, like you have to find your first 10 users, or someone made a great point here. I would first literally just like find my first 10, 15, 20, 100 users, ideally paying users, and then I would go beyond that. And also, someone I can share a case that if you say have 10 users in a city, say in San Francisco, versus if you have 30 or 50 users spread all across the world, which case would you pick? And I would personally go with the 10 users in San Francisco, because there's a lot of value in building for those 10 users, because then they would talk to their friends, and then they would talk to their friends, and then the process of them talking about my product would be much more widespread. The word of mouth would be stronger, and then I would eventually be able to replicate that model or learn and then use it to other cases. So basically, I would start with a super niche set of users.
That I'm just like blanking on the name right now, but it's something around the lines like don't sell just to your mom or something, or something to the mom test. Yes, exactly, the mom test. And really, frankly, I think earlier you brought out the point, like, are they willing to pay, right? That's one key factor to decide whether or not this is something that it's a painkiller or a vitamin. And then secondly, I think when you talk to your users, like obviously, I prefer to have obviously like a script and a list of questions that I would ask them, but at the same time, I would have a free-flow conversation with them. And just by watching their expression, like those moments of hesitations, you could tell they were like, oh, never mind, like it's pretty good, but like, and those moments of hesitations, you can actually pick up on those signals. And what I find is that when you're doing these user tests or these user interviews or these user conversations, it's really important to be honest with yourself and like figure out when are they actually hesitating, and not get yourself deceived. But if you haven't checked it out, check out the mom test.
Thank you.
I think for smaller companies, it's also important for the product designers to not be part of the user testing, because sometimes it's hard for designers to detach emotionally from the product, and they they internalize all the feedback, versus like when it's like a user researcher who's like away from the design process just for that moment. It also eases the participants into knowing that, it's not the person who actually made this. And we see this in like toy design all the time. There are a lot of AI toy design smaller firms, and when they sit in these play testing studios, children as users are brutally honest. They don't care for your emotions. So they're like, this sucks, I don't like it, it doesn't work. And all of that feedback, I can see some of the designers like shrinking physically. And I have to then, intervene and say that, maybe just have someone else on your team who was not part of the design process get some objective data without internalizing it.
So I think what you just said makes a lot of sense when you need actual sort of user testing with your actual product. But the previous point, oftentimes you can get a lot of really valuable insights without mentioning what you do at all. So the sort of user interviews we've done, like, I don't tell them anything about myself. I'm like, yeah, I'm building a product, but like, where were you born? And so you sort of, there's a, like, overall, I think the mom test is like sort of the best resource on this overall, but like trying to understand like how. So either you go to a customer that's already bought your thing, or what we did in the earlier days was we went to a bunch of customers who had bought a competitor. And I wasn't telling them anything about like what I thought the problem was we were solving or whatever. We're like, hey, like I know you use LinkedIn. When did you first think about like, when did you first hear about this? Like what was going on in your life? And you sort of try to objectively create this movie about everything that went on from them first sort of starting to have this problem to them, hearing about this, to them buying this, to them now maybe being unhappy. And like, you don't have to mention what you're doing at all. And so I've done a bunch of these interviews where for the first 45 minutes, I give them no context, and then I'm like, okay, like, by the way, perfect, because I'm selling exactly what you need. But like, that's the very last thing you should say.
And Marko, would you please also, just in case, explain what the mom test is to the audience?
The mom test, I don't know if anybody has the correct definition here, you can give it.
So it's basically that, you know, how our moms love us the most. The idea is to not go to your mom first when you are building something, because they might be, or the people that love you, they might be biased. The idea is to basically design your user experiments in such a way that they do not reflect your biases or the biases of people who care for you. So you design your questions, like to your point, you design your questions in such a way that you're able to understand your user without you telling them what you're building, and that you do in the early stages of product development, just to understand them that, okay, this is their workflow, and like I said that, is what I'm trying to build. I'm trying to validate my hypothesis, by the way, to this process. I have certain hypotheses pre-designed before this entire experiment, and during that experiment, I try to understand my user to even understand that is what I'm trying to do, is that even in the top 3 challenges that this user faces, or what are actually the top 3 challenges of that set of user.
Like to give a specific stupid example, like let's say I'm thinking of building a company that makes potato peelers. I could go to my mom and be like, hey, would you like to have a potato peeler that you can like put on your fridge with a magnet and it works in like both your left and right hands? And then she'll be like, yeah, that sounds great. The slightly more useful thing to do is like first understand like what do they care about vegetables, and then ask them like, okay, so like walk me through the process of you just came back from the store, you bought a bunch of potatoes, now you're like about to make a casserole with them. Like, what do you do? And then like you try to very objectively just understand the entire process, and then exactly like listen to those moments of hesitation or them using like weird language like, oh, this is annoying, or you know, it takes a while, and then just ask like, oh, tell me about that. Like, you said it's annoying, why is it annoying? And don't try to feed them answers for like, oh, you think it's annoying because you can not use it with your left hand. They might have a very different idea about that.
Yeah, in terms of the note of like creating distance, I mean, obviously it'd be great if you have somebody else to help you do that user research, but often when you're early stage as a founder, you have to go out and ask those questions yourself. So one practical tip that I have regarding making that distance is that instead of introducing, be like, yo, I built this, often what I would do is I would go up and be like, yo, my friend built this, I'm trying to get feedback on it, where in reality you're the guy who built it. But like then you can like then offload that a little bit, and then so then you can create space to enable the other person to hopefully be able to give more honest feedback as well too.
Wait, I have one tip, I think.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes like building a company, I wish I was a student, because then you can always use the card. I'm working at the university, we have this project, I'd love to hear some feedback about it. And usually people are way nicer and more open to give feedback if you're a student. If you're a company, you know, it's a great timing to actually start and talk to people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Akio. I have also used the student card a lot, and people just love helping the students, and it makes such a world of a difference. And I was doing like survey a couple of days ago, and exactly people care about 2 things. You're not trying to sell to them, and you're a student, and that also how much time is this going to take, and those 2 things can actually make such a difference. Because often students are so afraid of actually taking up people's time. So yeah.
So there's a company that I heard a very related story from. It was a bunch of dudes who were absolutely not students, but they cracked this exact same point. And so they went to Times Square and they had a sign that said, hey, we're a bunch of students, can you like give us 2 minutes of feedback? And they also used a girl for this, and they got like 20x the conversion rate, and they got a lot of really good feedback.
for the users, though. When I say, especially for in-person testing with kids, it's not just for them that, you know, if they knew you were the designer, things would be different. It's also for us, like inherently designers, we do bring a different perspective. We ask some questions with a lot of lived history that no one else is aware of. So if a child is stuck with like some feature that they don't understand, the designer was kind of involved through the entire process. So they give a lot of information that on its own, it's not self-explanatory. So especially with like tangible products and in-person testing, it's helpful to have some kind of unbiased facilitator.
I'll add one more point in this. So a very helpful tip that I got on this, because I've been the product designer, I've done a bunch of the engineering, and then I go talk to users. Like, what really helps is just shut up, don't say a thing. You know, maybe harder with little kids, but generally people, the other side will want to fill in the silence. And so if you just don't give them this leading sort of information now, like, you know, you see them struggling, just let them struggle. It's going to feel really awkward, but you're going to get a lot of really useful feedback. Versus if you're like, you just, you know, well, actually, the reason we designed it like this is like, it doesn't matter, just shut up.
That's a good point. I'm gonna shift our attention a little from the users, from the impact and feedback, and take a step back to actually create, before creating the product. They say the team is the dream, right? And you all had different experiences with working in teams. So what each of you were looking for when finding teammates in research, in academia, in different projects, in startups, what were the qualities you were looking for?
I think the answer is it depends also on your personality, right? So I think one thing you have to know about yourself is who can you work with, what are things that are deal breakers. So understanding that, I think, is the very first point, because without it, you are not able to express these kind of things clearly, and you will not be a good co-founder for that person. I think that's the first step. And then for example, for me, one thing which was kind of important is I think I have a little bit of high bar towards people in terms of what I expect from them, like how they act. So one thing I was doing is I was always asking, like, hey, would I bring this person, you know, to a dinner with my family? Because if that's not possible, I'm not sure if I will, you know, go to an investor and pitch with them, because I can't trust that they're like decent people. I think that's like a bar I set personally, and the rest, like the professional stuff, that's something you have to figure out. And in the end, you're in for a long game, right? No one's perfect. You have to be resilient yourself, and also accept like flaws of other people and continuously work on it. It's kind of like a marriage.
Kindness for sure. I think that's a very undervalued bar, and also it's not something that's like you can't find reviews about someone on the kindness scale. You kind of have to assess in person, through meetings, through small like mannerisms, and then I kind of approach the team building as like the Korean boy band type of strategy, where each member of the band has a very specific skill, personality that works together very tightly. And so once like the kindness bar is crossed, in our research team, we kind of look for, well, we're thinking about children's well-being. I'm bringing the children's media and design perspective. There's another researcher who brings the child development and neuroscience perspective. Another researcher has a more special needs education perspective. So together we are thinking about children's well-being from multiple perspectives. And so whenever we receive any project, we have a more holistic view than the part alone.
I think often it's quite helpful to just not immediately commit to doing this thing together with whatever person, but just, if possible, just try it out, right? It's often helpful to try out dating before you get married for like at least a decade, until you IPO the marriage, right? So that would be my tip.
A decade.
Very fun points. Just to add to it, just to add to Sonia's point, I would say that you basically look at the complementarity of skill sets. For example, if I'm say building something from scratch or like I'm working on a startup, right? I would initially onboard 2 or like other than me, 1 person or 2 people, something like that. I would look at why I'm onboarding each and every person in terms of what they are bringing to the table and how does it complement to what I bring to the table, right? Because I have, say, been in a situation where I and the other person, we were both bringing the similar kind of skill set. So now, who works on what? It's just kind of like also, okay, one person works on this, say, then the other person now has to learn this from scratch, and which is like something that they have to now invest the time and energy in. I would definitely value the complementarity of skill sets super early on in team building.
Yeah, I think having been to over 30 hackathons myself, thinking about who are the people you want to continue working with versus who are the people you're there for the hackathon. One of the most important things that you need to consider is definitely where you're coming from and what are your goals. Like being to so many hackathons, there are some folks who are just there for the funsies, there are some folks who are just there for the swag, there are folks who are there to potentially want to like practice a technical skill, right? And these are great people to potentially hang out with, but these aren't necessarily the people that you want to continue to build a company with. I think in terms of the people who have continued to keep in touch and worked on these projects in the long term, one of the core things is not necessarily even their skill sets, but in terms of the long-term vision, is that aligned? You know, because I think that a hackathon is obviously a great opportunity to kind of stress test those kind of working relationships. But at the end of the day, it's really at the end of the line, at the end of the tunnel, do you guys see the same peak? Do you guys see the same mountain worth climbing? And I think that that's the most important factor when it comes into kind of team matching.
Those are all very great tips. And applying it more to our hackathon, when we're going to have participants submitting their projects online, well, oftentimes you meet a person and you know instantly that you want to build something with them. But what if you develop a project alone and you submit a project to the hackathon on your own? How do you find your teammates for scaling that project further?
For me, I think that if you have a individual project, one of the most important things is potentially finding champions and allies. And I know how it feels to want to just hold everything to yourself because you're like, oh my gosh, I came up with this idea. It's my baby. I don't want to share this baby with other people. But the truth and the reality is that at the end of the day, in order to have this thing come into life, the best thing that you can do is to bring and find allies and champions. And this is a lesson that I learned very, very early on, is that as much as you think that other people are going to take away from the project, take away from the vision, or take away your equity or whatnot, is that you still need to have other people to be there with you. And so that's why you should be vocal about this problem. Because if you fall in love with the problem and not necessarily with your solution, then it doesn't matter who solves this problem as long as this problem is solved, right? And so frankly, you should be as vocal as you should with this problem. And you shouldn't be trying to hold it back. And that realization has made me realize that, frankly, being able to put that problem out there, spread the word, spread the message is the best thing that you can do to really having an impact on that problem itself.
Yeah, I think you made a fantastic point. I really, really agree with the power of like onboarding your initial set of champions. I can give an example to this. I was working on a project last year where we were building a career platform for early career women, and one of the things that we did was we were trying to onboard users, and it was a consumer product. So we were trying to onboard users and just like go out there, and me and the co-founder were like trying to sell it to users ourselves. And then at some point, someone advised us at the exact same point that, try to find the people who actually really, really love your product and would speak on your behalf. And so when we looked at who are some of the people who are interacting the most without us like nudging them enough. And then that helped us find our initial set of product lovers that were like, they really, really, really love what we are doing. And we used them, and then we had like 20 champions onboarded in 2 weeks, and then we literally quadrupled our rate of onboarding of our initial customers. It was just incredible to watch that, and that's why I absolutely love this point.
So I would separate out two sort of reasons to bring people onto your team. There's a very obvious one of, hey, you just need skills that you don't have, and there the sort of point about competition and complementary skills is super relevant. But there's another side that's less commonly talked about, which is just emotional support, which is sort of I would argue, maybe the main function of a co-founder. Like, you can technically hire people with skills, and if they're good people, like, you can probably motivate them to do a bunch of work as well. But there's a bit of a difference between, like, sort of who are the people that you're going to cry with together. You're probably not going to cry with a person that you consider to be an early employee. You can absolutely love that person, you can do great things together, but there's a difference between a sort of co-founder and just somebody early on the team.
I think if you're building a children's AI product, and if you build something individually and are looking for teammates, former teachers who are transitioning to EdTech roles are amazing for that kind of leadership role. People often overlook that kind of lived experience from classrooms. I would say look at Idle Academy, which is like a trade school where majority students are former teachers who are transitioning to instructional design roles. And so those kind of third spaces where people who are value aligned with your product, where do they naturally hang out? So for example, if I'm looking for potential like teachers, instructional designers who might also be a good partner for my product, I would try to find out where do they usually spend most of their free time. And that's an informal space to kind of, assess them, not a formal interview, but still try to assess like value-aligned partnerships. If you're in the children's AI space and are looking for more like technical people, some of the university labs that are focusing on social robotics for children or AI for kids, those can also be very inspired spaces to find technical people who also are already kind of proven to be passionate for education or like other sub-themes that you're interested in.
Maybe one more point on finding co-founders, maybe also especially as after Hackathon, so assuming that you're a first-time founder. One thing I noticed also for myself and also other people who founded the first time, usually people are a little bit secretive in terms of not telling people about their product, the thing they're working on, because they feel like someone could steal it. Also to your point, right? I think you really have to rationalize that 100% equity of zero is still zero, right? So you have to have that abundance mindset and also feel free to share it, also to your friends, right? Share your ideas, talk about it. Maybe there's a friend who might take a leap of faith and join you. I think that'll be the ideal case. So I think, go out there, talk to people about it, and then something will happen. But if you don't talk about stuff, nothing will happen.
Yeah, so many great points made. Sadly, time is pressing us on, so I'll move on to the last final question. As we really want to make this like actionable and like sort of inspiring on like what to do exactly next, I'm asking you, suppose that it is the day after the hackathon, what is the one thing that the teams or people should actually do during that week if they actually want to scale that idea further and go with it further? Yeah.
Start.
Having been to over 30 hackathons, if there's one thing you can do that would take you less than 30 minutes, that you should do immediately, either after the hackathon or within 1 week of the hackathon ending, that I wish that I knew from the very beginning, is to take your project, properly record a demo video, and post it on LinkedIn. That is the biggest tip that I could give you. Because frankly, I think that it's only then that you get the momentum. Otherwise, if after the hackathon, you're like so exhausted, maybe you recorded a 3-minute demo, but then like you were like half awake, half asleep, and the demo video was like, just like you walking through the things. That video is just gonna stay there and the project's just gonna stick there. But if you just take half an hour out of your time, maybe after you take a nap, after you rest up well, freshen up, and re-record that demo video, and really put in the time to just collect and reflect about what you've learned, what you've built, compile that into a little blog post or a little LinkedIn post, that can go miles in terms of helping you find momentum, finding further traction, and finding further interest in terms of your hackathon project. So there's one piece of advice that I would give every single team that I wish I knew from the very beginning of my first ever hackathon, is to really take your project, take just half an hour, clean it up, record a proper demo video, and share it on your LinkedIn or other pieces of social media.
Thank you, Chinat. I would say that one thing that you can also do immediately is just like, or like immediately or the next day, is reflect, did you enjoy the process of working on it or not? Because if you did not enjoy the process itself, then you are not going to continue working on it. So definitely I would sit back and reflect, how was the process like for me?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's what I was gonna say. Just figure like tomorrow morning, is working on this the thing that you want to do, or do you want to go do anything else? But if you do want to be doing this, then what I try to figure out is like, what's your first understanding of what are the things that you need to prove? Like, what are the like? It's not about necessarily like you need to get X customers. Like, there's some sort of uncertainty that you're gonna have around the company. Like, what are the riskiest things? Just try to get some clarity around that. And that's also going to be helpful for you to figure out whether this is actually something that you want to put a lot of time into. Like, some of those risks might be very interesting and they're fun to explore for you, and some of those might be like, oh shit, I don't want to deal with that.
You can also think that maybe you don't want to turn it to a full-fledged business on its own, but might it serve as a nice add-on feature to some existing product, and you can reach out to them. I'll give an example, like at CCA, some of my students, they designed a language learning assistant, and one of them was able to then go talk to Duolingo about it, that, well, I don't think I can scale it to a full-fledged product on its own, and I don't even like want to get into that, but could this be a feature? And led to, you know, talks about internship and other things. So, and another thing to China's point, like posting on social media. Sometimes I participated in the hackathon at Stanford. Because I'm dyslexic, I designed something for dyslexic children. I wasn't really interested in turning that into a business, but as a consultant, every time I get a client who's working on learning differences, they do mention that, hey, I saw your post about that hackathon, you developed something there. And so it just became a conversation starter. So it doesn't have to be seen through to a much higher level. It can be a conversation starter for something else.
I think all the good points were already said.
Thank you all so much. It's so much incredible advice has been given out, and it was truly a pleasure to have you all here. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having us on.